We want to thank TiE Rockies for hosting us today. If you have a business card, please drop it in the bucket that Molly has over there. We're going to do a drawing for some Starbucks gift cards. We will be having a keynote by Scott Schoens, and our agenda before we start is the top issues in the world of cybersecurity, protecting your network, email and encryption of email and data, third-party vendors, from hosting, cloud storage, and merchant systems, and cyber liability coverage, HIPAA, and high tech. First, I'd like to introduce Scott Schoens with the Denver FBI InfraGard, who will be giving a short presentation, and then afterwards I will be introducing our panel, and we'll go into our panel discussion. Scott Schoens is the FBI InfraGard coordinator. He's been with the FBI Cyber Squad in Denver with the Computer Intrusion Investigations and InfraGard program with the FBI for over 15 years. He's a special agent, CPA, and a cybersecurity specialist. Please give a warm welcome to Scott Schoens.
Thank you. I'm going to give you an overview a little bit about the FBI and the FBI cyber program and give you some resources that you can take away with you today, because every time I talk about computer intrusions and incidents that affect businesses, you leave the room and the next day something else comes out in the news and everything I told you is old news. So I want to make sure that I give you resources that you can stay up to date on what's going on, get the latest today from everybody here on the panel, but then also have something to go back to. So the FBI cyber program is our third overall priority within the FBI. Our first priority being preventing terrorist attacks, our second overall priority being counterintelligence operation, and then our third priority being our cyber program. And the cyber program actually touches on all of the priorities of the FBI, but specifically our number one and number two priority, because we're looking at those cyber terrorist attacks as well as those counterintelligence operations that are committed through computer intrusions. So we look at all the priorities of the FBI. And as far as small to mid-sized businesses go, where you'd be concerned where the attacks would affect you is we look at nation-state actors that are trying to get access to U.S. networks for the purpose of stealing intellectual property. So if you're a small to mid-sized business and you're developing intellectual property, think of how valuable that is to a foreign government that may be looking into that same technology or that same development. It's much easier for them to steal that data from you by hacking into your network, and then they can develop that technology and take all the knowledge you have. Or they will use your network as a launching point to gain access to other U.S. government networks. A lot of times we find small to mid-sized businesses may not have the sophisticated security that some of the larger corporations do, and the larger corporations are going to be blocking access to all foreign traffic coming in from all nation-state actors. So the nation-state actors, they'll get access to your network that may not have the robust security that some of these larger businesses do. And then once they've gained access to your network, they can launch an attack into another U.S. business and maybe have more success at doing that. So we see your networks being used for that type of attack. The other aspect that we see is the criminal computer intrusions. So we look at the nation-state actors, but we also look at criminal computer intrusions. And those are entities, organized crime groups that are trying to gain access to your network for the purpose of stealing data or stealing your bank account information, stealing your finances. So we see the Eastern European groups that gain access to your bank account and wipe your bank account out. And we'll see companies, small to mid-sized companies, a lot of times startups that are just getting going, if they don't have good security, they'll end up with an intrusion incident that takes place and their bank account gets wiped out. And we've seen some businesses that actually have failed, not specifically because of that, but that has been a contributing factor to the failure of their business. So it's important for you to understand where these attacks are coming from and how to protect your finances, especially if you do any online banking, which I'm sure most everyone does nowadays. So those are two areas that we're looking at, is the nation-state actors that are trying to gain access to your data or your network, or the organized crime activities that are trying to gain access to your finances. A couple of the main areas that we're seeing small and mid-sized businesses being attacked right now is crypto wall or crypto locker. viruses, which in essence ends up encrypting your hard drive. And the only way for you to correct that problem is either to go back to a backup that you have. Hopefully you have a backup to restore from, or you have to pay the ransom to get the encryption key. So that's one of the attacks that we're seeing affecting businesses. Another attack that's very common right now is business email compromise. We see a lot of businesses that will initiate wire transfers simply from an email from an executive in a company to the accounting department. The executive will send an email and say, hey, we need to send a wire transfer to this company, and they'll go ahead and do that based simply on the email. So we're seeing actors right now from Nigeria that have compromised those email accounts and then are initiating those emails to say send them the wire out, and the wire goes out usually to a money mule here in the United States. A money mule is someone that simply has a job to accept money in their bank account and turn around and ship that money overseas. Those are two of the primary areas where we're seeing businesses being attacked right now. And all of those attacks are coming in through phishing emails. Generally, if you're getting infected because you're receiving an email and you're either going to a link within that email of a website that's infected, or you're opening an attachment on that email. So as I talk to businesses, one of the most important things I say is be careful when you get that email in. Everyone's busy. Everyone has a lot going on. They have a lot of emails coming in, and they're very quick to click through their emails and open up an attachment or go to a link. That's the primary method that we're seeing people getting infected. If it's from the organized crime activities out of Russia or from Nigeria or even the nation state actors, that email compromise is extremely common. So just take that extra second, make sure you know who that email's coming from, and don't click on a link or open an attachment if you're not 100% sure of where that came from. So those are the attacks that we're seeing. Some of the resources that I encourage you to take notes on so you can get access to information going forward is the FBI's website, fbi.gov, has resources on there of recent activity. Another good website is ic3.gov, which is the Internet Crime Complaint Center. That'll give you the recent trends that are going on when there's new scams that are taking place. And the last resource is InfraGard. InfraGard is a public-private partnership led by the FBI in which we share information about threats to critical infrastructure. InfraGard's broken down into 16 critical infrastructures, and within each of those infrastructures, we have subject matter experts that share information about how to deal with cybersecurity as well as physical security. There's no fee to be a member of InfraGard. There is a background check that's done. It's a limited background check. The purpose of that is so when you're talking to other InfraGard members, you know that the individuals have been vetted. You know they have a limited background check that's been done on them. But InfraGard will give you access to updates that happen, what the latest trend is, what the latest attack is that's going out. Right now on the InfraGard site, there is a small business security tips that's available for you. 7 tips for small businesses in cybersecurity. And the InfraGard website is infragard.org, and InfraGard is spelled INFRAGARD.org. So you can go on the site and you get some basic information without being a member, but there's also an application for you to fill out on the site. It takes you about 5 minutes, some limited background information on you. Once you submit an application, once you get approved, then you get access to the secure website where you'll get flash notices on a regular basis that the FBI puts out, which shows what the latest trends are, what the next compromise that's going out, so you're aware of it and you're able to secure your network at that point in time. It also gives you access to trainings. We have trainings roughly 6 times a year here in Denver, and at those trainings, they're free trainings. We bring in subject matter experts from the public and private sector to come in and tell you about the latest trends that are going on and what you can do to help better secure your business. So I'd encourage all of you to look at that website. I have some brochures over here as well if you want to pick up some hard copy brochures on it. And I'll turn it over to Stacy.
Thank you, Scott. So now I'm going to introduce our panel. Scott's going to stay with us on the panel. Because we have so much to cover and a list of topics we want to go through in the next hour and a half, we ask that you hold any questions that you have for our panel to the end of our discussion so we don't get off track. If there's time, we'll take the questions, or you may visit with the panelists in the lobby afterwards. Our first panelist is Dean Clements. He is the Director of Consulting Services, U.S. Public Sector for Enterprise Security Solutions with Hewlett-Packard. Dean previously led the HP Enterprise Services Cybersecurity Consulting Group, 30 people for the Department of Defense and the federal civilian market. Dean holds security designations including CISSP, CITIL, and he's a retired U.S. Air Force colonel. As a colonel, he was the Director and Chief Information Officer for the Pacific Air Forces. He's a National Defense Fellow at the Harvard University in Information Resource Policy. During the Operation Enduring Freedom, then Colonel Clemens was the U.S. military advisor to the Iraqi Minister of Defense and received the Bronze Star for Meritorious Service. Our next panelist is Joe Bonnell. He is the CEO of Alchemy Security. And Joe has been a part of the information security landscape for 16 years, supporting a vast array of enterprise clients via professional and managed security services, including PCI compliance, smart grid security, penetration testing, incident management, and more. Like Dean, most of his clients are enterprise level. Joe is a regular presenter and panelist at IT conferences around the country. Brad Smith, on my right, is the president of CMIT Solutions of DTC. Brad's company provides cloud and IT infrastructure along with consulting services to secure networks and improve productivity to small and medium-sized companies. Brad has over 17 years of experience in software, network, and cybersecurity services. Next to Brad is Dan Kruger. He is the founder, chief architect, and chairman of the board of directors of Absio Corporation, our sponsor. Absio is a company that provides email encryption with software originally designed for the military, which is now available to corporations. Dan has been involved with software-enabled collaboration for over 30 years and is a published and contributing author of numerous white papers, blogs, articles, and books, and is a frequent and well-respected speaker on the topics of software collaboration, cybersecurity, and privacy. On the end next to Scott is Eric Zepanek. Eric is the Regional Underwriting Manager for Management and Professional Liability Insurance at Philadelphia Insurance. Eric manages a team of 10 underwriters who write management and professional liability, including cyber liability coverage for the Western United States out of their Highlands Ranch regional office. Eric is a regular speaker at risk management events in the region. Ray Hutchins is our last panelist in the middle. Ray is the president of Denver Cybersecurity and past president of TiE Rockies. Denver Cybersecurity Company provides a wide range of cybersecurity products and services. Ray is also a serial entrepreneur in the process of launching a cybersecurity website called Data One Qubit that will help small and medium-sized businesses evaluate software and cybersecurity companies. Set to launch sometime the end of this year, beginning of next year. Ray serves on the board of the Denver chapter of the Information Security Systems Association. Let's start our panel discussion by talking with Scott Shones about InfraGard and how they work with the small businesses in our community. Scott, can you give us some examples, without naming names, of big cases you've worked on where InfraGard made a difference by sharing valuable information that benefited investigations, the businesses and organizations involved, and the community?
I can talk about an incident in which we had a Fortune 500 company located on the East Coast whose website was compromised, and they were not aware of the compromise. And as a result, a nation-state actor was compromising other businesses that had went to that website. We actually had an InfraGard member here in the Denver area that was able to identify that compromise just through their independent research that they do. And they actually notified us. We were able to notify the company. able to stop the compromise and able to open an investigation on that nation-state actor and stop the leakage of a lot of intellectual property that was being stolen as a result of it. So it was a very successful situation.
That's good. Can you tell us about the kinds of industries that seem to be the highest targets and what kind of information that they're stealing? What kinds of businesses are getting the FBI involved when a breach occurs? They're calling you.
So we look at the different sectors that are being targeted. Some of the primary sectors that are being targeted right now are the defense industrial base, all the nation-state actors going after the intellectual property. The healthcare industry is being targeted. The energy sector is being targeted, and the financial services. Those are the sectors that are currently the highest on the radar from the nation-state actors. When we look at the criminal aspect of it, it runs across all the businesses because the criminal organizations are just looking at the bank accounts, the point of sale compromises, the credit card information.
Let's start by discussing some of the big issues that our panelists are seeing now that we know a little bit about what InfraGard's doing to help. Joe, what is the biggest security mistake new and old companies make with cybersecurity?
So I like to start with a joke sometimes that acceptance is the first step to recovery. And the reality is I mean, we get involved with a lot of different kinds of clients, really enterprise class clients down to very small organizations, and you know the number of instances where we're dealing with ostriches on the other side seems to be dwindling, but there's still it's difficult, right? I mean, there's lots of small business owners here, or people that are starting companies, and just being able to prioritize between the things you have to do to be successful as a business and the things that you're going to have to spend money on to protect yourself from one of these organizational ending events or one of these things that. So just accepting the fact that you need to pay attention to this and applying the appropriate level of controls relative to the risk of the environment is the thing that I continue to see companies struggle with.
Dean, do you want to add to that?
Sure, I'll add to a little bit. I think Joe's right on from my perspective. So I'm the HP U.S. public sector, so this think more enterprise-wide. So two things come to mind when you ask the question. The first would be, in fact, Dan and I talked shortly about it a little bit, this notion of fire and forget, meaning the business will do a initial cap invest or an OpEx or OpEx investment, and then assume that they after that initial investment, there's a complacency that kind of falls in. So there's a heightened, ramped up interest. They fund it, and then they want it to go away, right? They want it to be assured that, okay, that's good, CIO, we're good, right? And I not have to worry because I'm working the business element. So that tension between a need for continuous monitoring, continuous reassessment beyond the audit. You know, the audit is important, don't get me wrong, but it goes beyond that to have an awareness associated with the business unit, the ROI piece of it. So I think Joe's, if I can pair with that, Joe, I think you're spot on for one thing I'd press as well, at the enterprise level.
Okay. For the next question, I'd like everybody in the room to participate. Please raise your hand if you were covered by Anthem, a self-funded plan using the Anthem network, a PEO using Anthem, or have had Anthem in the past, all the way back to 2004. A lot of people. The question pertains to those of you in the audience and your staff that may have been covered by Anthem before they worked for you. I'm sure all of you have gotten notices in the mail about Anthem and the breach, and that they're going to provide coverage for you through some kind of breach notification and watching your credit and stuff. But I'd like to direct this toward Scott and Dean and Joe. Why is the Anthem breach more serious than having your credit card stolen? Who do you want to start? You go ahead, start.
So what we're seeing directly at the enterprise level, and again, public sector, what's happening in the environment is a lot of what appears to be lower level credit card information actually daisy chains now. So the IRS, and maybe you guys got involved with this as well, Scott. The IRS Gov that now has access to, in Colorado, I don't know the number, but in nationwide, 100,000 plus access to all your PII, and that's now they have your personal identifiable information, PII, PHI, personal health information. So Anthem grabs the attack was around the vector was around PHI. They now marry that, daisy chain it, pick up the PII piece, and do the attack on the IRS. So those are now daisy chaining. So it's not well, my credit card's been breached, I just turn it off. Amex is going to reissue me a new card. Maybe flip the identification on the back or whatever they're doing. It goes way beyond that. So if one accepts, and it's pretty well documented that 100 million people gave up in the last year and a half, have given up their PII or have been exposed, not given it up. That's essentially a third of America. Multiple attacks, multiple people, right? So it's not actionable, but yeah, that's why it's so important. The daisy chain piece, it's the collective in the aggregate impact to you as a business.
Scott, can you discuss what happens when somebody like Anthem is breached? What happens with that data? Because we're talking Social Security numbers.
So the concern is the data that's taken, all your PII data, how actors then can use that and obtain credit in your name, get a loan in your name. So if you're not having credit monitoring yourself, you're not going to realize until you go to buy a house or a vehicle down the road, and then you realize that you have all this credit that's been set up in your name, as well as using the information that they get to launch a further attack into your network. Now, if they have your email account, they can start sending you phishing emails to try to get you to click on a link or open an attachment and then infect your network. So it gives them another avenue for an infection.
Okay. Did you want to contribute, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe just to add to that from a different angle. So the things that were compromised with the Anthem breach were Social Security numbers, date of birth, name, email address, physical address, salary information.
And in my case, my tax ID number is a broker.
And yeah, right. Okay. So who got the letter from Anthem? I got one. I got 4 actually for the entire family, and we're not an Anthem customer anymore. And I think there's some bigger implications that are going to start happening out of this. I mean, you heard Scott talk about the Social Security numbers and that sort of thing. These are the methods that we're using collectively to authenticate each other, right? And essentially, in some ways, this authentication process, I think, is going to start breaking down. And I don't know what the longer-term implications of that are, and what that's going to be after that. But knowing that my 9-year-old is getting credit card offers, which is a true story, as a result of Anthem, there are implications beyond Anthem in a lot of ways.
Let's move our discussion to protecting your network. Brad, CryptoLocker and various keylogging malware or viruses are in the news regularly. Scott mentioned it. Can you tell us how these viruses and malware end up on a business computer, how it affects your whole system?
And there's numerous ways it ends up on your system, and the opening keynote there, he explained a lot of the different methods that are being used today. It's come to the point with CryptoLocker and CryptoWall in the last 6 months to a year with small businesses that it's really almost epidemic as far as them getting hit. And we actually went as far as with our clients putting in a new security layer where it's actually monitoring all incoming traffic. And if it sees threats, if it looks like it's malicious, it blocks it because it's just so rampant. And if they get on your network, and one of the new ways they're getting on the network is you can go to a legitimate website, and that website has some malware that's embedded in the advertising and on the web banners on the website, and without even clicking on the web banner, you're just looking at the site. And a couple of sites that were named, it wasn't just these two, but American Online and Yahoo Finance. So these are legitimate websites. They accept advertising, and they weren't filtering or figuring out a way to stop the malware getting in there. And so by just looking at that, that was then brought down to a PC on a network. That CryptoLocker then was looking for the server. It goes to the server and then goes about encrypting the data and then sends a ransom note. So it's a real issue that we're seeing this just change last year. It's pretty rampant, scary.
It's pretty insidious. So Dan, why isn't a good password and antivirus good enough?
How do I begin? So there's a lot of different reasons. First of all, a lot of focus on email security is on the inbound threats that these guys have talked about, and that's a real focus. But the problem, there's a couple of specific problems with email. One is that it more or less operates outside your network. It's the one system, no matter how secure your network is, where you intentionally let strangers in and you intentionally send secure information outside your walls. So email makes network security to a certain degree irrelevant. The problem with passwords is there's way too many ways to compromise credentials. So one of the things that the industry needs to do right now is do a much better job at figuring out how, if I get your credentials, I still can't load your account on my machine and use it. So that's one of the reasons it's trivial in most cases to get people's credentials.
Interesting. Brad, I have an antivirus program installed on my computer, but I still manage to get infected. Can you tell us why this is happening?
Well, in antivirus, it could be a number of reasons, because you get threats from, we talked about websites, and that just by visiting a website, by a link on an email. What you're asking an antivirus system to do is, once that infection is going on your network, to remove it and to actively do it immediately or do it during a scan. But the key is it's already on your network. So businesses should have a firewall, some other type of way to keep it off the network, stop those infections getting in there, and not relying on antivirus. And antivirus, again, if you're not keeping the definitions updated, and they haven't seen that threat before, and they haven't written an update to their definition database, then it's not going to stop it. So there's a lot of reasons why that'll happen. And one of the first things malware does is turns off your antivirus definitions. You'll think you're protected, and you're not. So if you're not monitoring it, yeah, then you're exposed.
Interesting. So, Joe, for some startups and small businesses on a budget, can you discuss the 3 top pieces of software that they should have on their devices that you think are the most important?
All right. I'm not going to say antivirus, and there's a reason why I'm going to say that. Antivirus, who here thinks antivirus is awesome? 20% awesome. 5% awesome, right? The problem with antivirus is the malware authors have gotten very good. You guys know how antivirus software works? It's basically looking for signatures of. So if you've got a specific type of malware that's been written, then it's basically looking through a database of signatures to see if it matches. Now, what attackers are doing, they're using the same malware techniques that they always have, but they're repacking the binaries to make them different links to make the signature look different, so they're getting bypassed by traditional antivirus software. So the first suggestion I'm going to make is looking at sandbox technologies like Invincia or Bromium that are designed to not only protect the endpoint from malware, but also looking at things like drive-by websites, like you heard Scott talk about earlier, and Brad as well. So that's going to be number 1. Probably number 2 is going to be something like KeyPass. Anybody use password software? A couple hands go up. Awesome. So you heard Brad talk about password reuse. The big problem that we see repeatedly is LinkedIn gets compromised, and then lots of, people want to try to pick a strong password, and then they use it everywhere, right? The reality is password reuse is just, you need to stop. And the only way you can do that effectively is with something like KeePass or some of these online password management tools. I'm a fan of KeePass because it's local. I don't have my password sitting in some cloud that is encrypted and all these things, but I just like keeping it local. So that would be suggestion number 2. And when you're using that, let the password program pick the passwords for you, and then all you have to do is just right-click, copy and paste into whatever you're authenticating. And I've got the same application on my phone, so if there's anything I need to authenticate, Twitter handles or whatnot, every password's unique. It's at least 15 characters with, all these different special characters. I will never remember them, but I delegate the technology to do it for me, right? So that would be number 2. And number 3. What's that? Oh yeah, email encryption is a good thing to take care of. Well, and to that, yeah, right. To that point, I read a study or a survey. I don't know if it was an InfraGard survey or what. It was a couple of years ago that 70% of a company's intellectual property is stored in email. And all you got to do is look at the Stratfor incident and see how much damage was done there just by compromising the email accounts of various executives, and to understand the full scope of the problem.
Unless you work for Department of State.
On that note, I'm going to switch to Eric. Eric, can you talk about what happens with negligence inside a business as an insurance underwriting manager and somebody that sees claims? You probably see the internal liability threat going on all the time. Can you address that?
Yeah, sure. The key point with negligence, I'd say, is that it falls outside of the scope of the multitude of regulatory statutes at the state level and the federal level. So even if there's an issue that falls outside the regulatory landscape, if you act outside of the duties of care in handling your client's information, there's a negligence component to that, and that can be a basis for liability for legal action from your customers and clients, because you did not take proper standards of care in handling that information and that data, and making sure that the data was secured properly, as the gentleman just spoke to. So negligence is one of the many avenues that plaintiff attorneys can use to attract class action lawsuits and really go after businesses for data breach scenarios.
Okay. Joe, can you tell us how small business would know if they're being attacked and if their business assets have been compromised?
I could tell them, but most businesses can't. And that's just the reality. So what we do a lot of in our business is security monitoring. So we help customers identify when nefarious activities happening on their networks. We support some extremely large companies. We support some smaller organizations as well. The reality is most organizations don't know when they're being compromised. And it doesn't matter the size or scale. When you look at the credit card breaches, most times those Target, Home Depot, you look at all the major ones, their SOC did not discover that. If we had the same kind of third-party fraud analysis with credit card loss that we did with healthcare information, if there was a way to do that, we'd be hearing a lot more about healthcare information related to tax. But the reality is that it's difficult. It takes a different approach. You have to know your environment. You have to know what your environment normally looks like all day, and you need a way to identify when that system should never be calling the internet. It's calling Romania on port 22, and understanding why that's significant and doing something about it. Right?
Stacy, I've got something to add to that.
And yeah, that's fine.
With respect to that particular subject matter, I'm kind of in a unique position where I'm collecting data on cybersecurity companies and products all over the world. So I see these products float past my desk, and and I see things that are new and unique. There's a product out there that's being adopted with big uptake by all the Fortune 1000 and lots of other companies right now. It's called BitSight. Okay, and for $2,500 a year, you can have this thing. They don't have to go into your network. They don't have to have permission to get in your network. They will identify your IP addresses, and they will monitor your network and monitor the traffic in and out of your network to all the bad guys and give you a report card, like a FICO report on your company, and give you transparency in your network and give you an idea as to whether or not your system is under attack and in what way, et cetera, et cetera. There's some amazing new stuff coming out. I mean, there's so many new things coming out. I mean, you're not aware of them, but today, because you're participating in this particular event, I'm letting you know about this particular product out there, which kind of addresses this one subject in terms of transparency and understanding what's going on in your network.
And Ray, with this new website that you're getting ready to launch later this year, you're looking at different cybersecurity products that need to be implemented outside of antivirus, firewall, and this other project. What are some of the other things that Joe didn't mention that you think are important to a small business?
Well, in my view, I mean, if you're going to be defending a network, I mean, you've got people, processes, and products that you're going to apply to the defense strategy. And so I'm focusing to a great extent. Well, I focus on people and processes also, but my product, Data 1 Qubits, focused on products. And so in terms of a small business, you've got to have a minimum of 5 products: perimeter protection, access control, encryption, email protection, security awareness training. I mean, that's kind of like some basic blocking and tackling. And so, but which 5 products, which ones are you going to, they're not all created equal. So you've got, that's a vendor assessment. That's a hard thing to do. A larger enterprise, I've seen enterprises with as many as 60 products, deployed over their network. And some of them are causing conflict with one another and whatever, and degrading the entire operation. So it's a hard problem. It's a difficult problem. But if you kind of flip that conversation back around to, people, process, products, and they go after the people side of things, okay, well, you can do a lot of good. Okay, if everybody internally is on board, not clicking on the links in the emails, okay, not using admin as your password. I mean, some things like that, you can do a lot of positive good for yourself. If you send me an email, I'll send you a list of free things you can do for your network and free steps you can take to protect your network and your small businesses. That it's just, a lot of it's common sense, but it takes that discipline. Disconnect from the internet at night when you're asleep, okay?
Amen.
I mean, that one's not rocket science, but at night, a lot of times, is when they're going to exfiltrate from a small business.
Yep. So we should turn our conversation to email. It's a crazy time right now. The average small business has employees who are opening a lot of email and they think they're safe. Many times it's an uninformed employee that downloads a virus just by clicking on a link in an email, like we were talking about. I'd like to turn our email to our email expert, Dan Kruger, to open up this discussion. Dan, the average small business is flying blind with email. Can you tell us about some of the strengths and weaknesses with well-known email services like Microsoft Outlook and cloud-based business apps, Gmail and Outlook within Office 365, iCloud, and others?
How long do we have?
2 minutes, 1 minute.
So here's the thing to understand that most people miss about email is that email has a tremendous number of places where it can be compromised. So first of all, let's talk about the thing that people normally call secure email, which is transmission security. My connection between my computer and the server that's handling my email is encrypted. Great, it's a useful thing to do. But first of all, that's proved to be fairly weak in many cases, especially over the last year. Just got a report in last Thursday or Friday. There was an exploit that was discovered last year called Heartbleed that compromises email servers. And at the last, I think this was Verizon, it might not be, they estimated that only 30% of the servers have been patched. So that exposure is still out there. You have email service providers that can read your email. And I'm not talking about Google doing stuff for advertising. Part of the problem with email is you literally do not know how many servers it crosses. You don't have any way of knowing what those servers are doing with your email. Are they making a copy? Are they analyzing it? Are they selling it? You don't know. You have the compromise on the end devices. A lot of the major breaches happens because somebody grabbed a phone, tablet, or a laptop, and I have, quote, secure email, but it's all encrypted on my laptop. I was having a conversation a couple of weeks ago with a security architect for a Fortune 500 company, and with one of the senior managers was on the phone, and they were very, very, very proudly pointing out their shiny new, really good secure document system. And I asked the security architect, for every document that's locked up in your secure file sharing system, how many unencrypted, unprotected copies of that document are in email? And he said dozens. And then finally, the last thing regarding the vulnerability of email, people get very focused on files. Anybody here remember Sony? What was in file attachments what got Sony in trouble? No, it's what they said. So there's just the problem with email, again, to kind of summarize it, is there are just multiple points of attack, and unfortunately, if you don't start with the information in control, you can never get it in control. That's the problem.
So, Dan, there are a variety of encrypted email services out there, including yours. Can you tell us about the products that are on the marketplace in general and how they protect a small business? How does that work?
Yeah, you've got to be, and if anybody wants, we can grab my card at the end of the meeting and I can send you an analysis that we just did. The thing you've got to be careful about is understanding what people are selling that's secure. There's a lot of good products out there that handle a piece of the problem. They'll handle transmission security, or they'll handle inbound email, or they'll improve authentication, or they'll encrypt a message on the server but not on the endpoints, or on the endpoints but not on the server. So the thing to look at with all the different products that are out there is to figure out how to make the coverage comprehensive. So I know this sounds self-serving, but the thing about it is that if you really want to secure email in the current environment, with the typical email add-ons that are out there, you would have to buy 6, 7, 8, 9 products and apply a lot of faith that your email was actually secure from your device all the way through all the different steps to your recipient's device. And the hole that's still left is you can't control what the recipient does with it. What if the recipient is a perfectly honorable person, but their device is compromised and a piece of malware is picking up your email that you assumed would stop there and resending it out?
That's amazing. So, Dan, what should a small business be looking at when they're reviewing their email options for encrypted and non-encrypted? Should they be looking to be in the cloud? You've mentioned about trying to stay with one device and locking things down with email. Can you discuss that a little bit?
I think the first thing, so I'm going to not quite answer your question, and sorry.
That's okay.
The first thing that a small business should do is to do a little bit of work. We have some materials. There are other people that publish materials. Our CEO, who's sitting out in the audience, wrote, and who here is an attorney? Okay, nobody. Okay, good. I could make lawyer jokes. Okay, wrote an article at the request of the Colorado Bar Association to explain to attorneys, so we use small words, what you actually have to look at when you evaluate email security. And that's the first thing I would do before you go off and evaluating products, because everybody throws around the word secure. Most of the products do exactly what they say they do, but the consumer doesn't know, the small business person doesn't know that that's applicable to this single slice of the problem, not the whole thing. So that's the first step I would do, is understand how email works.
And it might only work with certain devices or only
Might
one
only work
device?
with certain devices or certain circumstances. There's a lot of variability there. We created, because we get asked this question so much, we created a competitive analysis that actually starts off asking all of the questions that you should ask about email. And if anybody wants a copy of that, my card's over on the table, and I'll be here, and I'm happy to provide that to you. You can use that as an analytical tool completely separate from Appsio.
And if you also put a card in the box, we'll send it out to you. So.
Okay.
What was your name again?
This
Mine?
is Dan Kruger.
Dan.
Yeah. And let's talk about email in transit, at rest, and encrypted email. When should encrypted email be used, and why is it crucial to most businesses? I think mostly of the financial and healthcare. Anytime you're dealing with data that has somebody's social security number on it. But are there other times that people should be using encrypted email that they don't even think is important?
Okay, short answer for that is, if you can do it, is it should be encrypted all the time, everywhere. Again, email runs above your network security. Right. So ideally, you would never want to have an email or an attachment hit storage anywhere that's unencrypted. The goal is to, because I think it's very, very difficult to prevent a breach of email, is to make the breach irrelevant. You got my files? Knock your lights out.
I'd like to turn our discussion to third-party vendors for hosting, cloud storage, and credit card. Joe, it seems like so many businesses depend on their hosting or cloud storage company to be secure. With so much data stored in the cloud, how can the average company protect themselves? Can you tell us about the security of services like Amazon, Google Drive, Dropbox, Box, and iCloud, along with online merchant payment systems like PayPal, and the responsibility of small businesses using these vendors?
Well, you're really you're putting all of your faith in that vendor, right? I mean, I'm surprised at some of the companies that, as large as they are, use Salesforce as an example for not just sales management, but also case management and incident ticket handling and that sort of thing, because there's all kinds of things that end up in tickets that are in the Salesforce cloud. So you're really, when it comes to software as a service customer or providers, you're really kind of at the mercy of how good they are. And we struggle with this as a services organization as well. We've looked at different CRM solutions, and we keep coming back to ones that we can keep in-house, because I don't want to have to extend our risk of our customer base to Salesforce doing their job. And I'm not picking on Salesforce particularly. They've got a very strong security team, but that's really the reality of it. So one of the things that we've done is we've partnered. Does anybody do business with Lattices, Zayo? You guys know those guys? So they're, what's that? Okay. So they're a colo and hosting company here in town. They've got roughly 5 data centers throughout the country before Zayo acquired them. And we do a lot of business with their customers that have IT processing needs, but they're never going to have a SOC. They're never going to have the experience or the ability or the time or the wherewithal to do that kind of security monitoring. So you see a lot more hosting companies now that are offering these types of services. So if you guys have IT assets that you're managing yourself, I would seriously consider looking at a hosting company where you can start to piggyback some of these services on top of, outside of just leaving yourself open to the SaaS provider, because it's really out of your control at that point.
What about for the storage of just data, your storage of files outside of like your CRM? A lot of people, they set up accounts with Amazon, Google Drive, Dropbox, Box. Are any of these more secure than others, do you feel, or?
No. I mean that's the reality of it. I mean, I trust Google as much as I trust Google, but Google's been compromised by how many governments that we know about in the paper. So, you can trust Google as far as you can trust Google. I mean, I think what most people need to do is think about what your business is and what you do, right? I mean, attackers are motivated when they see the prize before their eyes. For everybody else, you're just a drive-by. And so the way we kind of characterize it is we like to try to protect Switzerland and let them be Switzerland.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's the reality of it. I mean, a lot of these, one of the customers we had, we've never done business with agriculture. So we got a customer, they create new strains of bean seed, they sell it to the farmers bring back the beans, and they redistribute the beans globally. Pretty low risk profile business, right? Don't have any intellectual property. Some of their most advanced technology includes a bean sorting machine that, when the belt breaks, they grab another belt off the wall and replace it. But that is the technology of their business. Now, they were hit with some malware on the payroll administrator's workstation, and they ended up having $500,000 worth of ACH wire transfers happen over the 4th of July weekend. And they were really lucky in that they didn't hit the operating account, because their operating account had about $300 million in it. So, I mean, it could have been a really, really bad day versus this was a pain in the CFO's rear, right? Because he didn't budget $500,000 going out the door. But, it could have been a lot worse. And so most attackers are going to be more opportunistic with individuals with things like ransomware or, targeting people. And so if you have people, so you need to look at your organization and figure out kind of who you are. If you're an Anthem, your threat profile is a lot different than, a startup or a smaller organization that is maybe in the lawn mowing business or the bean business, right? So you have to think about yourselves in terms of that way. Then you have to think about who are the key players, who have the keys to the castles, and provide a level of protection for them that is more important than others. So hopefully I answered your question there.
And Dean, to continue that, I think about what he just said about payroll systems. Everybody thinks about, well, I don't have a lot of secure data on my system, and there's a lot of employee data when you're dealing with payroll and health insurance and other items. Can you discuss how you're protecting data on both their end and on the third-party vendors that are going in and out of systems, and some of the things that small businesses need to be thinking about when they're dealing with this kind of data, and they think that, I don't have a problem, but they really do.
Okay, so let's use the Home Depot attack. Y'all remember December 2014 went over, actually started in November, went in December, some remediation in January of this year. That was an attack that used the HVAC vendor, got their credentials off the HVAC, used that to log into Home Depot. So that that's what you're talking about, Stacy. Am I kind of touching on what you're
right? But I'm thinking like on a smaller scale. Some of these folks working with even small regional payroll vendors, even an ADP that gets hacked into and then it goes all the way down to their level.
Okay, so I'm the enterprise guy, so I may not be the perfect.
But no, it's okay. I mean, because it all interfaces.
Okay, so boy, how do I want to bring that down then? So what I would recommend is in your partnership agreements, either through a memorandum of understanding or agreement or a contractually binding statement of work with your providers and your secondary team members, that you build in that relationship, and I'll turn it over to Eric and he can talk more about that piece of it. But that's how I would attack it. I would attack it by ensuring when that partnership is established, what the agreed upon protocols, what is the incident response activity, who contributes to it, to have that conversation, and the bounding nature of a contract. I want to respond to that at all, Michael?
Sure. The problem with contracts, whether you're talking about payroll services or outsourced IT, if you're a small or medium-sized business, how much negotiating power do you really have when you sign up with these large Fortune 500 vendors? Probably very little. In most cases, the contracts are probably going to be in the favor of those providers, not you, from a legal standpoint. So you can talk about, as a risk mitigation tactic, does it help to have outsourced IT or outsourced services? It can be a good way to outsource some of that liability, but at the end of the day, from a contractual standpoint, there still might be a good deal of liability you assume despite that contract. So
that kind of leads me into some of the questions I did have about insurance. I questioned some companies recently that were PEOs, and a lot of them didn't have certain coverage outside of their general liability. And this gets back into all the third-party vendors you're dealing with: payroll, health insurance, other accounting services, anybody that has access into your system. And a lot of folks don't think about having a business agreement in place that's signed between the two parties, discussing how they're locking down data and their responsibilities. The other issue is the cyber coverage and the professional liability coverage. There's so many small and medium-sized companies that are just flying by and they do not have coverage. And if they get breached and they have your data and it's going between your systems, you could be SOL just trying to deal with it, because they'll go out of business. They don't have coverage. So it's so important that you get these in place. So we're locking down our systems, getting policy procedure in place, encrypting the data and the email. Most businesses do not realize that their general liability coverage specifically precludes a breach. Some of the biggest companies with IT teams have been breached this year. We've discussed Home Depot, Sony, Anthem, and they've got cyber coverage. It's an important part of our discussion because it just takes one incident. And a small business is literally out of business within months of an incident if they don't have the money, the incident response team, and the legal team behind them. This is why I asked Eric to be here today. So we will turn to Eric Zephanik to talk about cyber coverage and some of the claims. Eric, so many of the people I talk to tell me, I don't need cyber coverage. I'm storing data in the cloud. And I use Amazon or Google or iCloud. And my favorite one, the person who tells me, I don't need coverage, I use PayPal. And I'm covered by them. Can you address that and where there's a risk?
Sure. Maybe first off, it'd be helpful to explain what cyber coverage is and how it covers a business. It's really a multi-part policy. The intent really is to cover businesses' own networks from the types of scenarios we mentioned earlier: data breach, intrusion, email compromise. Those sorts of intrusions to your own business network is what cyber is designed to cover. And there's a multitude of coverages that are built into those policies. I won't go into all of them just now, but as we talk more about the coverage, that's what we're looking at is coverage for your own liability, some of your restoration costs if you have to restore data, your cost to notify customers, your cost for forensics to investigate a potential incident. All these are costs that are going to be insured under your cyber insurance policy. So with that said, back to the outsourced IT question. Again, the contracts can be problematic for a small or medium-sized business. It is a good risk transfer tool. You're putting a good deal of the risk associated with your IT to those vendors. But at the end of the day, if there's a compromise to your data, you need to ask the question is who your customer is looking to first. They gave their data to you. If you're in the healthcare profession, you're have a surgery center or a medical billing practice, your clients see you as the first line of attack because they gave their information to you and they hold you responsible. And the real critical piece when we talk about data breach compromise from a cost standpoint is, your business reputation is at stake, right? How many individuals stop shopping at certain large retailers after some notable breaches in the news? There could be significant public relations and customer loss due to how you handle an incident. So if you're relying on a large outsourced IT vendor to protect you in a situation, you might be waiting in line for how many hundreds of thousands or millions of customers does Amazon or Google have in line before you that are all waiting for a response in the event of a breach. So really, when it comes to these types of incidents, you want to be proactive. You want to be able to manage your own risk, manage your relationship with your clients, and having cyber insurance protection in place allows you to really manage that and take the risk into your own hands and really navigate the problems.
So we're seeing the average small business breaches between 500,000 and $1 million, and higher when it's healthcare or medical due to the HIPAA and high-tech laws. What are the consequences and costs of a breach? The kinds of fines and things that they have to deal with.
Okay. Well, let's talk about what's insured. And you can talk on the front end, really, what directly after a breach is discovered or identified. What are the costs associated? So one of the first calls you might make as a business owner if you discover you have had a breach is to a breach coach attorney. These are specialists that can help navigate you through the entire process of the multitude of state and federal requirements, regulatory requirements, who you have to notify, when you have to notify. And those attorneys are expensive, especially if they're not at a pre-negotiated rate that most insurance carriers have in place. So that's one cost off the bat. The next piece might be your forensics. So you have to hire an outsourced firm to come in and investigate what happened. How many records were compromised? What's the next steps to secure the system again so that there's not reoccurring incidents? Those types of professionals are expensive as well. Forensics is a very important piece of the response equation. From there, you look at things like the cost to notify. How much does it cost to mail 30,000 physical letters to each of your clients whose information was compromised? If it's $5 per letter, it adds up pretty quick. And then you look at the things like credit monitoring. So to really protect your business reputation, you want to offer your clients some sort of resource so that they're assured that you're taking the best action possible to make sure that their credit information is safe. So do you offer maybe 12 months or 24 months of credit monitoring services to your clients? Each of us that got the letter from Anthem, I think most of the that letters had some type of credit monitoring service built into that letter. So these are all costs that go into the front end of a data breach or cyber incident. And the good news is with the cyber policy, all those costs I just mentioned are insured. And then you look at the things like litigation and the cost to defend yourself if your clients or customers or employees bring suits. The cost to pay for fines and penalties if state or federal regulatory bodies proceed with fines and penalties. These are all the back end costs that could result with how you handle the breach incident. So a lot of costs involved in the entire equation.
So Eric, can you tell us about some of the claims you're seeing? Can you tell us about the range of the claims that Philly and your colleagues at other companies are paying out? And what are some of the high-risk industries you're seeing affected outside of healthcare and financial that are seeing large claims?
Yeah, I wish I had a more diverse group of claims examples to present. The claims we pay tend to be in healthcare, quite honestly, and in retail. So health data and credit card data are the two that are triggering the largest claims and the most frequency of claims. So retail companies, the biggest ones that we insure happen to be in the hospitality industry, so restaurants, hotels, any company that tends to have low-wage employees on the front end taking credit card transactions. A lot of times employees are the bad actors in a data breach incident. And in one case in particular, we had a chain of restaurants. There was 5 or 6 employees working together over a 6 months time period. They had hardware on each of the credit card scanners that stole, I believe, like somewhere near over 100,000 credit card numbers in a 6-month period, and that's the type of claims that really add up quickly, because the cost to notify each of those 100,000 individuals, to find out, even to get their contact information, and just because to sort through the who ran a credit card during this 6-month period, how to contact them, it can be really expensive. So that alone is an example of a really expensive claim.
Okay. When it comes to software as a service and mobile apps, why do small businesses who develop software need coverage combined with professional liability? Can you also give us some examples of breaches in these protocols and types of claims you're seeing against developers?
Yeah, so professional liability is, again, I'm sure most of you are aware, but it's akin to malpractice insurance. So if you're in the technology services industry and you commit a wrongful act, an error or omission in how you provide those services, that can be the basis for liability. So professional liability covers that malpractice exposure, so to speak, in the professional services. And the question here really ties to the need to have a combined policy. And I don't want to get too insurance detailed here, because I'll bore the heck out of all of you, but there's a gray area when it's a technology service provision and there's a data breach or cyber incident, where the claim falls. Does it fall to the cyber insurance or to the professional insurance? And because you're in the business of technology, there's really a gray area of where the claim can fall. So really, at the end of the day, it's important to have the same carrier for both coverages. Really, so you don't have two different carriers pointing the finger at each other, or a situation where you might not be covered for one portion of the claim. So it's really a dual exposure, and it's important to have both coverages in place.
And it sounds like it would be important that anybody that you're doing business with that is advising you, whether it's not just developing software, but doing your cybersecurity, that you want to make sure that they're covered.
Yeah, absolutely. That's part of the equation we talked about when we talked about negligence and vendor selection. It's really important that you're doing your due diligence when you select vendors, that you're screening them, that you're ensuring that they have coverage in place, that they have adequate limits of professional liability in place. So that can fall back on you. A good plaintiff attorney might ask the question, did you properly screen your vendors to make sure you're picking the most secure vendors that had the best, adequate limits of insurance in place? If not, that might be a basis for negligence.
Okay. Eric, can you tell us why cybersecurity and cyber liability coverage are important to corporate boards and their risk for not having both in place? And Ray, I'd like you to address it also. He's done.
Yeah. To that question, it really, I think, it goes back to the enterprise level more so maybe than the small and middle market level. When you look at like public companies and the board of directors and the officers in place, and some of the big retail examples we mentioned earlier, a large nationwide data breach incident can be a very negative news story against your organization. It can lead to drops in your share price. It can lead to, I think in some of the more recent cases, there was questions of termination of the CEO and other top executives. So that falls back onto the directors and officers, insurance and liability there. But really, at the corporate level and the enterprise level, I think it can be a very large risk if you're a decision maker, and how well did you ensure that you took the appropriate action to secure information to prevent a catastrophic event from taking place.
I think you can tell from Eric's response here, the complexity of this subject of cyber insurance and cybersecurity. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Chicago at the Advising Cyber Insurance Conference. I was out there pitching my Data 1 qubit data stream to the insurance industry. But as I kind of a sideline there, listening to the insurance companies, listening to them struggling with how to come to grips with this issue nationally. There are about 55 different companies with cyber insurance products right now. Some of them, like Chubb, been around, I think, 1977, if I'm not, okay. 1977 had their first product out, and a whole bunch of them, they're just getting into the business right now and trying to understand how to write the products, how to measure the risk, how to manage the risk, and I heard so many cautionary tales out there. Eric just mentioned his last example over here in terms of, how if you didn't screen your vendor properly, how you might end up in a situation of negligence. And that's nothing against the insurance industry. That's just everyone trying to define, well, who's responsible for what in here, And you've got all these vendors, you've got all these players, and they roll out these questionnaires on you, and the questionnaires, there's a lot of difference between these questionnaires these insurance companies are pulling out. Some of them are much more involved than others, and then there's the whole conversation about, which was an interesting conversation that I heard at a cocktail party. It had to do with 1/3 of the premium dollar was going for admin, 1/3 was related to profit, 1/3 was related to overhead, and if the overhead and whatnot started getting too large, then that's when they started looking at denying claims and whatnot and upping premiums. And I'm going, whoa, listen to this whole thing. Yeah, you need cyber security insurance. I see that as a good idea, but you got to read that damn contract, and you got to get your head wrapped around it. So there's just one more layer of complexity in protecting your intellectual property. And with respect to the board that you're talking about, the boards, well, that's just showing you that we are all in this thing together. From the top of the food chain all the way down here to the rest of us down here, we're in it together, trying to protect our intellectual property from this horde of billion-man opportunist armies traveling at the speed of light around Earth trying to steal what we got. It's freaky.
You mentioned something about the application process on a cybersecurity or cyber liability coverage, and as a broker, it's something I've noticed. There are some huge differences between insurance companies. I do work with Eric's company, and there are 55 different companies out there, but it's amazing. There are professional liability coverage companies out there that it's kind of interesting. They'll contract with a non-admitted carrier, which is a company that they can kind of do what they want. They're not they're really not covered by the state insurance funds, and they'll have these applications that might have like 10 questions on them. And I actually had several long conversations with a law firm that I ended up insuring on cyber liability coverage, and actually we have it with Philly. He knows the case. And by the time I was through with the guy, he's like, we want the one with the 5-page questionnaire that's more expensive. We realize we're going to get the best coverage. We looked at the contract because we do provide specimen policies to these potential policyholders so they can review these contracts. And they understand there's a difference between an admitted carrier, a non-admitted carrier, and what you're paying for. And it's something you've got to be aware of when you go through purchasing coverage. So let's move the conversation to talking about ransom. It's something that's happening a lot. A hacker locks down your computer, your network, and you have to pay to get your data back. This is even happening to independent consultants and solopreneurs. I think I had heard somebody in TiE Rockies had this happen to them recently. It was either TiE Rockies or CXO. Molly probably knows the person. Have any of our panelists experienced ransom situations with their clients? Anybody? Where they can talk about them? No? You've probably paid some ransom claims.
We have not. I checked.
No?
It's an area that's covered. So we do pay for actual ransom monies or extortion monies if a criminal were to get access to your network and demand $150,000 or we'll shut you down. The example we always use is the florist before Mother's Day, and we'll shut you down for the week before Mother's Day if you don't give us X amount of money. We haven't seen any paid claims in our book of business yet, but it is a covered cause of loss, and it's a coverage that's included in our suite of coverages. So,
We had a client that got the encrypt the wall locker infection, and again, I got to keep it confidential, but the good thing, we had a real good backup system there. That's one thing no one's talking about today, and that's if something does happen, you know, like I said, a couple things for businesses, you better have a good backup. And we had a system there where it was backed up every hour. So we were able to, once this happened, all of a sudden they couldn't see their contracts anymore. And they're there on the server, but you couldn't open them up. And we were able to actually go back hour by hour and see when this infection started, and we were able to revert their number back the way it was, and they got out of it. So they were lucky that way. And they just, it was a bad email that someone answered, and it brought that infection in-house. So be very careful.
Stace, can I add a little bit to that? Because I think Brad's right on. So if you're going to rely on a other vendor for your backup recovery type activity, be sure to, again, going back to the point of contracts and how they're written, be sure to look at your business needs for the return point objective, the RPO, you know, how far you want to go back, and then the RTO, the return time to objective, meaning I want you back in 4 hours, and I want to go back. I want to go back. I'm okay with losing a week, or I'm okay with losing an hour, but I'm not okay with losing a year. So understand those subtle differences. Does that make sense? Does that help, Brad, on what you're talking about? No.
Let's discuss some of the legal issues regarding cybersecurity compliance, HIPAA, high-tech, and business agreements, and move the discussion to HIPAA and high-tech. An ordinary business breach is around $200 a record just for notification costs, credit monitoring, and so on and so forth. With healthcare and medical data, we can look at a lot more costs when it comes to a breach. Recently, the Poneman Institute, in conjunction with IBM, revealed healthcare breach notification costs for a stolen record were as high as $363 per record for the average cost to handle a healthcare breach. With legal and all the other things, probably the average on a healthcare was about $4 million for a healthcare breach. We know about the forensics, reputation management, ransom, and legal fees that need to get covered. I've read about some of the regulatory fines related to HIPAA and high-tech. They're quite horrendous. Eric, can you talk about some of the HIPAA and high-tech penalties for small business that's not cyber secure, and who's imposing these penalties?
Sure. So HIPAA is enforced by the Office of Civil Rights at the Department of Health and Human Services on the federal level. And so this is the organization that would be doing the enforcement and assessing fines and penalties to business entities that fall under the scope of HIPAA for non-compliance. And there's really two types of businesses that can fall under HIPAA. The most obvious would be your healthcare providers, companies that are directly engaged in the provision of healthcare and healthcare services. The other class of business that, under the passage of the most recent update to HIPAA, which is the High-Tech Act in 2009, they extended the umbrella of HIPAA to extend to business associates. And this can be your accounting firms, your technology, IT firms, any business that works with healthcare services and provides ancillary services that really touches the medical and healthcare data that fall under HIPAA can be fall under HIPAA as a business associate and also be required to be compliant under the compliance requirements of HIPAA. The fines and penalties can be pretty daunting. The per violation penalty can be as high as $50,000 with a $1.5 million calendar year cap. So if there's repeated violations, you could be looking at up to $1.5 million per year. And the scary thing is some of the examples we're seeing, it's not just the big healthcare providers. It is, we're seeing local and regional healthcare providers, surgery centers, doctors groups, whatever it might be. you can see some really hefty fines and penalties from the OCR. So.
And it's not just happening because somebody's gotten into the network by doing some kind of attack. You and I have discussed there's a small hospital that was in Massachusetts. The doctor was going on an overseas flight, had an unencrypted laptop, and this ear and eye infirmary of Massachusetts had a $1.5 million fine from HIPAA and high tech.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. The level of penalty varies depending on what the cause of action was. Was it willful noncompliance? Was it accidental? The severity can differ, but at the end of the day, it's a scary additional source of cost associated with compliance and a data breach.
So have you had some big claims on HIPAA and high tech?
Yeah, that's where we see probably the most frequency and some of the largest severity. Outside of what I mentioned earlier was the credit card information. I think healthcare is number one. That compromises a good portion of our book of business for cyber. So we're seeing the largest claims and the most claims in the healthcare sector, and some have a HIPAA penalty, fines and penalties equation to it. Others don't. Others are strictly just liability claims. But it's certainly the area that's the most exposed from my standpoint as an insurance carrier.
Dean, can you talk about this from the business agreement point of view when you're dealing with healthcare operations? Because you deal with a lot of big healthcare companies at HP.
The prophylactic piece of it, or where do you want me to
Just
go?
the kinds of business agreements that you're basically having to tell them to get put in place with all the different vendors they're working with, and conforming with and being in compliance with HIPAA and high tech.
So let me structure this around, and then Dan can jump into what we're looking for is adherence to a bunch of assessment controls. All right. So there's a National Institute for Standards and Technologies right up here in Boulder that does the IT piece of it. And so we're setting up these agreements that there's 17 families of controls around access, authentication, personnel, physical security. So our agreements are around that set of controls for the federal client. If you are, and most of you are, on the commercial side, what I recommend to you that when you're setting up your agreements, make sure you bounce that agreement with the NIST set of controls, National Institute of Standards and Technology set of controls. And what it does, it picks up, there's a separate set, it's an integrated set of controls around HIPAA and high tech, the implementation of the act actually. So as long as you're adhering and setting up those agreements consistent with that NIST standard, you'll be perfectly fine. Both for your audit, if you're doing annually, your review, and ideally in your success. Dan, you want to talk more about that from Excess or Joe?
Maybe just take
Yeah,
the other
Joe,
side?
why don't you talk about it? 'Cause
So,
you work with a lot
so
of
we,
this.
we're seeing, I've been on that side, and now we're seeing it from the other side. So how many in the room have had to basically respond to these types of questionnaires? Okay, so it's getting to be a big pain point with our customer base because they don't have the strategy, they don't have an understanding of like how to respond to these questionnaires. Half of our customers, when they walk in the door, they don't understand what the questions mean. And we're seeing more and more businesses that are doing lots of work with financial services and healthcare companies that are taking Dean's advice here, which is good guidance. I mean, but what we're basically seeing is this whole class of enterprise class security requirements being pushed down to, in some cases, 4-person shops. And they've really struggled to deal with this problem. And so we've seen a lot of demand on just trying to respond to that. And it's only going to get worse. If you deal with those sectors, you're going to end up with these agreements and you're going to have to deal with them.
Okay. Well, this brings us to almost the close of our event. We'll take a few general questions from our audience. Does anybody have any questions for our panel? Yes. You have to speak loud.
Where you talked about the Anthem breach, and for individuals, not companies, who are in that, I mean, what do they do? Do you sign up for LifeLock? What do you do?
As an individual? Well, that's a damn good question. I got a 9-year-old and a 14-year-old I have to think about and include, in addition to ourselves. So we've got 2 years of identity monitoring, courtesy of Anthem, across 80 million customers. That's going to be a pretty big bill for them. Outside of credit monitoring, at the moment, there's not a lot that you can do. I mean, there are these organizations like LifeLock. I've not used them. Have you guys any experience with LifeLock?
And I can make some comments about that. LifeLock and some of the identity theft companies, they just provide monitoring, and you have an 800 number to help you out if something happens. They're not going to go and restore your identity. There's only one company that's currently doing it, and they just launched this whole new campaign. It's the ID Shield through Legal Shield. Our company handles it, and I have it on myself because if, God forbid, something happens, they use Crawl, and Crawl basically takes power of attorney and just restores your identity. So, and I understand, I think LifeLock is maybe double the cost, and they don't provide all those services, but that's a very good question. I think what's happening is a lot of these companies that are providing identity theft coverage, they're just doing the minimal amount. It's just for a year or two. And one of the things you have to do is take control of your family's data, because once that identity theft protection is gone by the Anthem or whoever it is that got breached, you're going to be stuck with it yourself, trying to protect it. Does anybody have another question?
Can I just jump in real
Sure.
quick? One thing I would encourage you to do is get a copy of your credit report, which you can do annually if you're not aware of.
Yeah.
You get a free copy, and there's actually 3 credit bureaus, so you can actually get 3 copies a year, so you can get them every 4 months. So if you go ahead and do that, you're on top of your credit 3 times a year, and you can continue to do that forever, and if there's a change, you can get on it quickly.
Just one other thing on that really quickly from the personal experiences of friends of mine. If you got a 10-day-old with a social security number, check theirs too.
Yes. You want your whole family to be covered.
Well, and just to add to that, and not to keep drawing the point, but minors are a major target for cyber criminals because their credit history is pure, and it's usually unwatched until the age of 18. So they can use minors' credit to perpetrate ID fraud for a number of years before they're ever caught. So minors tend to be a more lucrative target for criminals.
Yeah, so first of all, a shameless plug. You can use Credit Karma and get your credit at any time. That's a free credit monitoring software or whatever. Has nothing to do with me, but just something that's out there. So one thing I wanted to ask, I don't know who's best suited to answer it, but it seems like everybody, this might be a little bit sacrilege with this panel, but it seems like there's erring on the side of locking down your security, but there's a trade-off with that, and that's less productivity, less ability to collaborate. So I kind of wonder, how do you evaluate that trade-off? And I mean, using an analogy for like a really quick, like riding the bus in San Francisco, if the fee is more expensive than 100 times, or if the fee is less expensive than 100 times the amount of the cost, then if you only get caught once out of every 100 times, then it's worth it to cheat, right? So the same thing is true for not having cybersecurity, right?
Sure. So 2 things very quickly. One, yes, risk analysis matters. You don't want to spend more to protect what you have, right? On the flip side, I disagree with your approach and your perspective. When we see shops that have really strong IT operations, their security posture is actually not so bad. Typically, I mean, the way we liken the problem is not that we don't know what to do. I mean, hackers are mostly opportunistic. If you can thwart them long enough, they will go somewhere else. And that's the name of the game. But when you see good, strong security or IT operations in general, that means their systems are patched and current. They're doing lots of things on a day-to-day basis. So when we see good security posture, it's usually a result of good IT ops, and good IT ops usually results in businesses being able to do better faster, right? So, I mean, technology does have a plus. We've been talking about the minuses here today, but that's my perspective.
Just one additional thing on that, that's one of the things to evaluate in different cybersecurity products. The range of inconvenience they create is huge. A lot of people that I've seen, you know, they hear about something from somebody and they take a look at that and that's what they get, even though it's a pain in the neck. That's one of the things to evaluate.
Yeah, but it's not just your security within your system, right? It's also like data sharing across different systems and what you were talking about in terms of evaluating a third-party vendor for their security. I mean, I look at Anthem, and the breach of Anthem is going to lead to more insurance companies locking down their data when everybody would benefit from a more collaborative approach, right?
Let me get you a little bit different answer to your question maybe that might be useful. I talk to people about asking 3 questions, okay? And people get all wrapped up in the details of cybersecurity and all that kind of stuff. 3 real basic analytical questions to ask. Is my data worth protecting? All right, number 1. What is the risk in my data? If I assume that my data, and data's big picture, right? It's files, messages, emails, records, you name it. What's the risk in my data if it gets out to the people I don't want to have it? Question number 2. And then question number 3 that doesn't get asked anywhere near enough is what is the risk that people are going to use my systems to launch an attack on somebody else? And if you don't really have a solid handle, at least conceptually, on the answers to those 3 questions, you don't know how much time, money, and effort to put into cybersecurity. And what I keep on being surprised about from companies very, very large to very, very small is they don't ask those 3 questions first. So they don't know what to invest. They don't know what is X worth, and I'll spend enough, and it's worth Y to spend to produce that X result. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but I see that all the time.
So I was going to jump on the last point, Dan. I think you captured it. So what you're really kind of taking us to task on is a very good question. And what we're asking the CIO and the CISOs of those organizations is to do that analysis on the risk, right? So if in fact they can articulate, as we consult with them, if they can articulate what it cost, is it worth protecting, and what is the price of the control, right? And if it's the cable car or whatever.
I mean, it's not just dollar amount; it's also lost productivity.
Right, exactly. But they should, and what we're asking everyone here to do is be able to have that analysis internally and understand what that value trade-off is, that risk trade-off is. So yeah, I don't think we're all let's lock it down and not have productivity. We wouldn't have jobs very long.
And there's a couple quick things on cloud sharing, for example. Instead of having everyone in a business having their own individual Dropbox account, where everybody in the business can send out information from their business and it goes to their own account. I mean, you can have collaboration that way, but that's very unsecure. Whereas there's a lot of more better ways, just with some planning, to put together some enterprise file sharing. And that way, if someone does leave the company, you can stop that end user, and you still have the collaboration. So it's, again, just kind of thinking that through and still providing that capability, but don't put your head in the sand and let people do what they want.
We're going to take one last question because we have to close this down and be out of the room shortly.
Yeah, so as a small business owner, the reality is that we have to use a lot of outsourced services, and specifically cloud services. When we assess our requirements, we have things like metrics, like reliability and performance, and of course cost, functionality. Are there metrics available that we can go back to the cloud computing services companies in the cybersecurity area to give us a better feel of how to assess the different options that are available to us?
Absolutely, and you should be asking that question. We had a question earlier about Amazon and Google or iBox. You mentioned a number of them. You need to be asking your cloud provider exactly that. Have them show you their metric. And going back, and I don't want to harp on this too much, but it really is important. This NIST set, they are bound to that for the different levels of security. including cybersecurity as they provide those cloud services. So if you get there, and there's a actually it's the results of a survey is what it is, and it's a report out on a survey that identifies which cloud providers, and survivors, the providers, where they rank on the respective assessment security families that I talked about earlier under NIST. And they will rate, and they should be able to provide you. In fact, the ones that are really reputable will be happy to give it to you because it shows how competitive they are. All right?
I want to thank everybody for coming. Molly's already waving at me. Oh, okay.
I'm going to just use my running this event card to ask one last question, because I think that we probably have entrepreneurs and people involved in startups in the audience. So my question is, how does cybersecurity, maybe having some kind of cybersecurity liability, is it affecting companies' valuation, and are investors looking at this? And I think probably right. Answer that.
That's a great question.
The idea of the idea that for all the entrepreneurs out here, if you're building any kind of an application of any kind, now is the time to build in cybersecurity. Trying to go backwards afterwards and build it in is just, a fool's errand. So up front, when you're architecting your system, cybersecurity is built in at all the layers, at all the time, all the way through it. And it'll make a great difference to you when you're raising money. I happen to be raising money for what has been described as the most expensive cybersecurity startup in the world right now. Don't get too carried away with that statement, but that has been labeled on it. But one of the things that's giving it a shot, a success, is that cybersecurity was engineered and architected in at the very beginning, from the very get-go on it. So that's definitely a consideration. And thanks for that question, Molly.
And, when you start looking at being a startup and trying to get venture capital and trying to put together a board, a lot of these folks are going to start asking, if they're not already asking, do you have cybersecurity in place? What kind of software do you have that's protecting your system? And they're going to ask you if you have cyber liability and professional liability coverage, and along with getting directors and officers coverage in place. It's all going to be combined together, and it's going to be important because they want to know that they're not going to get sued from being on the board by working with you. I want to thank everybody for coming, and I'd like to thank our board our panel this afternoon.